Hello, YouTubers. Welcome to Level-Headed News. This is your host, Brenda. I have 5 articles in this edition. This will be the second of 3 editions that I'm putting out for you today, in case you're keeping track. All these URLs, of course, are in the description of the video so that you can pull them up and take a look at them for further research or checking out the videos in them or anything that you'd like to see. The first article that I have for you here is off of zerohedge.com, and it says, Obama quietly signs the Countering Disinformation and Propaganda Act into law. And here's how the article reads. It says, late on Friday, with the U.S. population embracing the upcoming holidays and oblivious of most news emerging from the administration, Obama quietly signed into law the 2017 National Defense Authorization Act, or the NDAA, which authorizes $611 billion for the military in 2017. In a statement, Obama said that here's the quote on it. It says, today I have signed into law S-2943, the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2017. This act authorizes fiscal year 2017 appropriations principally for the Department of Defense and for the Department of Energy national security programs, provides vital benefits for military personnel and their families, and includes authorities to facilitate ongoing operations around the globe. It continues many critical authorizations necessary to ensure that we are able to sustain our momentum in countering the threat posed by Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, and to reassure our European allies, as well as many new authorizations that, among other things, provide the Departments of Defense and Energy more flexibility in countering cyber attacks and our adversaries' use of unmanned aerial vehicles. And then the article goes on and says, much of the balance of Obama's statement blamed the GOP for Guantanamo's continued operations and warned that unless Congress changes course, it will be judged harshly by history, Obama said. Obama also said Congress failed to use the bill to reduce wasteful overhead like perhaps massive F-35 cost overruns or modernize military health care, which he said would exacerbate budget pressures facing the military in the years ahead. But while the passage of the NDAA and the funding of the U.S. military was hardly a surprise, the biggest news is that it was buried deep inside the provisions of the Defense Authorization Act. Recall that we reported in early June a bill to implement the U.S. a bill to implement the U.S. very own de facto Ministry of Truth had been quietly introduced in Congress. As with any legislation attempting to dodge the public spotlight, the Countering Foreign Propaganda and Disinformation Act of 2016 marks a further curtailment of press freedom and another avenue to stultify avenues of accurate information. Introduced by Congressman Adam Kinzinger and Ted Lieu, H.R. 5181 seeks a whole government approach without the bureaucratic restrictions to counter foreign and disinformation and manipulation, which they believe threaten the world's security and stability. Also called the Countering Information Warfare Act of 2016, S-2692, when introduced in March by Senator Rob Portman, the legislation represents a dramatic return to Cold War-era government propaganda battles. These countries spend vast sums of money on advanced broadcast and digital media capabilities, targeted campaigns, funding of foreign political movements, and other efforts to influence key audiences and populations, Portman explained, adding that while the U.S. spends a relatively small amount on its Voice of America, the Kremlin provides enormous funding for its news organization, RT. Surprisingly, Portman continued, there is currently no single U.S. governmental agency or department charged with the national level of development, integration, and synchronization of whole of government strategies to counter foreign propaganda and disinformation. Long before the fake news meme became a daily topic of extensive conversations, on such discredited mainstream portals as CNN and WAPO. H.R. 5181 would task the Secretary of State with coordinating the Secretary of Defense, the Director of National Intelligence, and the Broadcasting Board of Governors to establish a Center for Information Analysis and Response, which will pinpoint sources of disinformation, analyze data, and in true dystopic manner develop and disseminate fact-based narratives to counter effrontery propaganda. In short, long before fake news became a major media topic, the U.S. government was already planning its legally backed crackdown on anything it would eventually label fake news. Fast forward to December the 8th, when Countering Disinformation and Propaganda Act passed the Senate, quietly inserted inside the 2017 National Defense Authorization Act, NDAA, conference report. And now, following signing of the NDAA on Friday evening, the Countering Disinformation and Propaganda Act is now law. Here's the full statement issued by the generously funded Senator Rob Portman, Republican of Ohio, on the signing into law of a bill that further chips away at press liberties in the U.S. and which sets the stage for a future which hunts and website shutdowns purely as a result of accusation that any one media outlet or site is considered a source of disinformation and propaganda and is shut down by the government. President signs Portman-Murphy counter-propaganda bill into law. Portman-Murphy bill promotes coordinated strategy to defend America allies against propaganda and disinformation from Russia, China, and others. U.S. Senators Rob Portman, Republican of Ohio, and Chris Murphy, Democrat of Connecticut, today announced that their Countering Disinformation and Propaganda Act legislation designed to help American allies counter foreign government propaganda from Russia, China, and other nations has been signed into law as part of the fiscal year 2017 National Defense Authorization Act, NDAA, conference report. The bipartisan bill, which was introduced by Senators Portman and Murphy in March, will improve the ability of the United States to counter foreign propaganda and disinformation from our enemies by establishing an interagency center housed at the State Department to coordinate and synchronize counter-propaganda efforts throughout the U.S. government. To support these efforts, the bill also creates a grant program for NGOs, think tanks, civil society, and other experts outside government who are engaged in counter-propaganda related work. This will better leverage existing expertise and empower our allies overseas to defend themselves from foreign manipulation. Foster a free and vibrant press and civil society overseas, which is critical to ensuring our allies have access to truthful information and inoculating people against foreign propaganda campaigns. Our enemies are using foreign propaganda and disinformation against us and our allies, and so far the U.S. government has been asleep at the wheel, Portman said. But today the United States has taken critical steps towards confronting the extensive and destabilizing foreign propaganda and disinformation operations being waged against us by our enemies overseas. With this bill now law, we are finally signaling that enough is enough. The United States will no longer sit on the sidelines. We are going to confront this threat head on. I'm confident that, with the help of this bipartisan bill, the disinformation and propaganda used against us, our allies, and our interests will fail. The use of propaganda to undermine democracy has hit a new low. But now we are finally in a position to confront this threat head on and get out the truth. By building up independent, objective journalism in places like Eastern Europe, we can start to fight back by exposing these fake narratives and empowering local communities to protect themselves, said Murphy. I'm proud that our bill was signed into law, and I look forward to working with Senator Portman to make sure these tools and new resources are effectively used to get out the truth. Bipartisan Countering Disinformation and Propaganda Act is organized around two main priorities to help achieve the goal of combating the constantly evolving threat of foreign disinformation from our enemies. The first priority is developing a whole of government strategy for countering the foreign propaganda and disinformation being waged against us and our allies by our enemies. The bill would increase the authority, resources, and mandate of the Global Engagement Center to include state actors like Russia and China, as well as non-state actors. The center will be led by the State Department, but with the active senior level participation of the Department of Defense, USAID, the Broadcasting Board of Governors, the intelligence community, and other relevant agencies. The center will develop, integrate, and synchronize whole-of-government initiatives to expose and counter foreign disinformation operations by our enemies and proactively advance fact-based narratives that support U.S. allies and interests. Second, the legislation seeks to leverage expertise from outside government to create more adaptive and responsive U.S. options. The legislation establishes a fund to help train local journalists and provide grants and contracts to NGOs, civil society organizations, think tanks, private sector companies, media organizations, and other experts outside the U.S. government with experience in identifying and analyzing latest trends in foreign government disinformation techniques. This fund will complement and support the center's role by integrating capabilities and expertise available outside the U.S. government into the strategy-making process. It will also empower and decentralize networks of private sector experts and integrate their expertise into the strategy-making process. And then the article continues and says, and so, with the likes of WAPO having already primed the general public to equate Russian propaganda with fake news, despite admitting after the fact that their own report was essentially fake, while the U.S. media has indoctrinated the public to assume that any information which is not in compliance with the official government narrative or dares to criticize the establishment, it also is also fake news, and thus falls under the Russian propaganda umbrella. The scene is now set for the U.S. government to legally crack down on every media outlet that the government deems to be foreign propaganda. Just like that, the U.S. Ministry of Truth is officially born. The next article I have for you is off of BizPac Review, and it says, concerned about Obama's midnight regulations? You should be. Check out his exit spree. With a few weeks remaining in his final term, and while on Christmas vacation in Hawaii, President Barack Obama has pushed a flurry of big decisions. That's how Fox News characterized a series of recent announcements from the Obama administration, adding that Republicans are concerned that Obama will jam through so-called midnight regulations and other leftover items from his wish list. And it has more from Fox News. This little insert, it says, in the last week alone, the Obama administration blocked future oil and gas leases in swaths of the Arctic and Atlantic Oceans, granted a record number of pardons and computations for a single day, and scrapped a dormant registry for male immigrants from the list of largely Muslim countries. Defense officials told Fox News there is an effort underway to transfer up to 22 additional detainees out of Guantanamo Bay. And Obama's ambassador to the United Nations stunned Israel on Friday by abstaining on a Security Council measure condemning settlement activity, allowing it to pass. And Obama appears to be saving his biggest and best effort for last: everlasting peace in the Middle East. Little gem from Jonathan Schnauzer, Vice President of Research at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, says fresh off giving the U.S. allies the shaft by abstaining on the anti-Israel UN resolution condemning settlement construction, it appears Obama has more surprises in store for the Middle East only democracy. And make no mistake about it, Schnauzer lays out a perfect analogy of the president's anticipated actions. And he tweets here, basically, after dousing the region in gasoline for 8 years, Obama's about to light a match and flick it over his shoulder as he walks away. And there's several tweets there in response to that, if you want to pull it up and take a look at that at your leisure. Next article I have is off of Conservative Tribune, and it says, Dictator. Obama makes mad power grab, puts offshore drilling out of Trump's reach. Against the will of the American people, President Barack Obama made the last-ditch power grab to try to render President-elect Donald Trump's agenda ineffective before his administration has even begun. According to Time, Obama will permanently ban offshore drilling in most of the U.S.-controlled Arctic and Atlantic seaboard, a move that will limit Trump's ability to deliver on his promise to boost the oil and gas industry by scrapping Obama-era environmental regulations. The ban was being disguised as an effort to conserve marine species by protecting against oil spills, but if those species were in danger, one would imagine Obama would have made this move years ago, not 1 month prior to Trump's inauguration. The way this is possible is because of a seldom used provision of a 1953 law giving the president authority to identify block oil and gas drilling in some waters controlled by the United States, according to the New York Times. Because the law has never been used this way before, Trump's ability to overturn Obama's unilateral action was in question. However, with a Republican-dominated Congress, what may be able to be undone is the law itself, though that may take some time which Trump's hands might be tied. The left predictably ate up this move, hailing Obama as a hero for environmentalism. And there's some video in this if you want to pull it up to take a look at that. It says millions of people around the world will be grateful to President Obama for permanently protecting much of the Arctic and Atlantic coasts from catastrophic oil exploration and development, Greenpeace spokesman Travis Nichols stated. Decisions like these are crucial. Liberals love power grabs until somebody they don't like is in power. The incoming Congress may not be among the millions of people who laud Obama's move, and instead will likely see it as a loss for potential opportunities. Alaska Senator Lisa Murkowski has already said Arctic development is one of the best ways to create jobs, generate revenues, and refill the transatlantic Trans-Alaska pipeline. Why the president is willing to send all of those benefits overseas is beyond explanation. No, it's called liberal agenda. The next article I have for you is also off of BizPac Review, and it says, Rabbi invited to kick off national menorah lighting ceremony at White House shames Obama over the UN. Israelis are furious at President Obama, calling the latest UN stunt a shameful ambush. Rabbi Levi Shemtov, who kicked off the first day of Hanukkah at the White House National Menorah Lighting Ceremony on Sunday, slammed the Obama administration decision to allow the United Nations to condemn Israeli settlements in the West Bank. The move was seen as a slap in the face to longtime ally Israel. Rabbi Shemtov urged Jews to not give into darkness, the Daily Mail reported. Subban spoke before fighting darkness with light. I remember those words being spoken to a particular man by the Rebbe Rabbi McKitchem Mendel Schneerson many years ago on Shemot Torah. The Rebbe told him, you are working in a place where there is great grief and darkness, but remember that in that place of darkness, you can only counter it by lighting a candle. By creating light, that man was Benjamin Netanyahu, and he was at the time the ambassador to the United Nations. So, as I know that some of us are so sad at what happened there with regard to Israel, we must remember that the way to counter any darkness, any disappointment, is not with harsh rhetoric, not with anger, but when we create light, the darkness dissipates. On Sunday, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu accused Obama of helping craft and push the UN resolution, which he called a shameful ambush. We have rather ironclad information from sources in both Arab world and internationally that this was a deliberate push by the United States And in fact, they helped create the resolution in the first place, Netanyahu Representative Dave Keyes told Fox News. President-elect Donald Trump also blasted Obama's decision, calling it unfair to all Israelis. In a statement, Trump said, "The big loss yesterday for Israel in the United Nations will make it much harder to negotiate peace. Too bad, but we will get it done anyway." Many on social media were equally outraged by Obama's seeming betrayal of Israel, our only true ally in the Middle East. And there's a list of tweets there on that one if you want to read what those folks had to say. The next article and final one in this episode is off of Sons of Liberty Media, and it says how social media is blocking, locking, and hacking alternative media to shut us down. In the wake of all the fake news stories and alternative media exposing fake news, corporate media, social media giants like Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter have chosen their side in the war of free speech and freedom of the press. They've chosen to be on the side of the Marxists in government, both Republican and Democrat. Aaron and Melissa Dykes of TruthStreamMedia.com reported that their posts, videos, and website were blocked, locked, and hacked recently. And this is what they wrote. It says, our Facebook posts about it were blocked on our YouTube videos counts were locked down for over 24 hours with the views were taken off, and then our website was hacked and shut down completely. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is how they're going to start shutting down the alternative media and free speech on the web, blocking, locking, and hacking the info. My video features a congressman speaking on the House floor about a very alarming bill that was recently passed. It's not fake news. In fact, if you watch the video yourself, you probably agree with me when I say I wish like hell it was fake. But of course, most of us realize that fake news is just another way of saying anything the system wants censored. Starting with the truth about what's really going on right now, while the establishment's mainstream PR firm media continues to peddle whatever the distraction agenda du jour is. And then the article goes on here, and it says, take a look at what happened to the Dykes after they uploaded their last video, and there's a link there where you can click to take a look at that. And it says, the same thing's happening to this site. We are being targeted with limited exposure on Facebook. Our emails are being listed as spam by anonymous sources, even though we have a double opt-in system in place. We have been listed as fake news by corporate media hacks. I'm thinking it's about time that we fight back, not with words, videos, or mere rhetoric, but with a class action lawsuit against state-controlled media installations like the New York Times, the LA Times, as well as Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube for the libelous claims of being fake news or untrustworthy. These are the same outlets pushing those opposed to American ideals. Then we should begin lawsuits targeting talking heads on news programs who label us fake news while giving the likes of CNN and the BBC a pass, even though we know they have engaged in stage news propaganda. If you are a member of the media and wish to engage in such lawsuits, please contact me here, and there's a link you can click on there to get in touch with them, and it says, and let's see how we can get the ball rolling. We must bring justice to the enemies of freedom, or will be destroyed along with those we are seeking to free from their bondage. So there you have that article, and that's the end of this episode. If you like what we're doing, give it a thumbs up, share it around so people get the news while we can still get it out. Be sure and subscribe if you haven't already. Click that little bell on the subscribe button and check the box so that you get email alerts when I do shows. And I've got one more episode for you, so we'll see you then.